never really took hold in my mind since I was a little kid. My first reading was the Greek myths. So I assumed that gods and goddesses referred to all these different interesting characters. And as I pursued my studies and reading and grew older and older, I kept reading more and more of the stuff. So when I read about and learned about the gods of Christianity, it never occurred to me they would be the only ones, because I already knew about all these others. And I felt the same way about relationships and about love. I knew that obviously my parents were married to each other, but I wasn't really paying a lot of attention to their relationships. I was more interested in my own. And even as a little kid, I'd meet girls that I would think were really neat, and I didn't see any reason why I couldn't, connect with another one and another one, another one, and keep the whole set. I didn't see that you could only have one at a time. Never quite registered as somehow the way to be. And so it kind of just was that way, with my life, and it got me into a lot of trouble because most of the girls really wanted to be the only one, and that was a problem, sort of, in high school at least. But right between high school and college, a science fiction author named Robert Heinlein published a book called Strange in a Strange Land, in which he actually articulated a very reasonable proposition that if love is a good thing, more love would be a better thing. And if you love somebody, right, you can also love somebody else. Just like if you're a parent and you have a child, you could have another child and love them too, and you don't have to get rid of the first one just because you have more. You can just keep on expanding. The idea that love shared is love multiplied seemed like a perfectly good idea, especially given the unique premise that Heinlein introduced in Strange in a Strange Land. Then that was the definition of love. He redefined love in a form aptly suited to the 1960s as that condition in which another person's happiness is essential to your own. And that seemed like a perfectly good, reasonable definition, which those of us who read that said, yeah, that's right, that's cool. Well, in the story, he then goes on to discuss this in the context of things like possessiveness and jealousy, and that's not really about making your partner happy. None of that stuff, So, and it's very articulate and very well reasoned and very logical, and those of us who read that can, well, that makes sense, let's do it that way. And it worked. It's worked fine. And over the many years of the emerging pagan community, this meme got imprinted right at the very dawn of the whole thing, before we even used the word pagan, before we even described ourselves that way, when we were just isolated little individuals starting little groups here and there of like-minded people. This particular meme had already been imprinted. And so people became lovers with people in different groups, and a network of lovers sort of permeated the emerging community from its earliest days among the founders and leaders. But we never really made any big deal about it. We were just doing this. It just seemed like, why not? There was no problems. It all worked out. We were all perfectly happy with it. And then Morning Glory and Diane, our third partner in a triad marriage that we had for 10 years, were publishing a Green Egg magazine, which was the legendary publication that I started in 1968 and which has continued for decades. Now it's an online e-zine. And Diane suggested to Morning Glory, who was mentioning, we were talking about some people having cheating relationships. She said, well, they're just not following the rules. That's not how you do it. You don't do it by going behind somebody's back and breaking agreements. If you want to have other relationships, you do it all together. And Diane said, you're always talking about these rules. Why don't you write something for Green Egg about the rules, how to make it work? And so she agreed to do that. And in the process of this, the question came up, well, how do we refer to this? There was no language. There was no term for it. There was no word. People talked about monogamy, and that was pretty clear. Monogamy means marrying one person. And so they could talk about polygamy, which means marrying several people, and that's fine. And they talked about open relationships and lots of things like that. But there was nothing that was a positive, simple statement about what it means to have many lovers, that you're not necessarily married, So the terms involved are terms involving love and multiple, And traditionally, in coining new terms, you use roots that are either Latin or Greek, because they have great roots. You can then weave into things. But we looked at that. The first inclination, of course, was most words in the Western world are coined from Latin, and the word for that would have been multi-amory. It just sounded awkward, It didn't quite sound right. So well, let's go to Greek. Greek has got a lot of cool stuff, and that word would have been polyphilia. But that sounds like some kind of disease, and we don't want to say, oh, we're a bunch of polyphiliacs over here, I mean, they're going to want to hospitalize us, or give us some kind of medicine, or maybe start a fund for a cure, but it's not going to really convey what we're trying to talk about. So in the process of discussion, Morning Glory had this brilliant idea. She said, well, why don't we just combine the Greek and Latin, and came up with polyamory, polyamorous relationships. And everybody gets amory, love, amor, l'amour, all that kind of stuff. It sounds, you get it right away. And poly, everybody knows what poly means. Poly this and that. So it just clicked. And it was the perfect word. So she incorporated it into this article, Bouquet of Lovers, which was published at the Beltane issue of Green Egg in 1990. And it took off. Suddenly, with a word to describe themselves, people started using it. They said, well, that's what we're doing. But the word itself also carried this description and this definition and these rules on how to conduct it, being honest and open and upfront with everybody involved. And also the implication that, this is not something that we're trying to advocate that everybody should do at all. It's that if you find yourself in a situation where you are completely in love with somebody, and then you find yourself falling in love with somebody else, as often happens with people, well, that can be okay. It's just as okay if you have one kid and then you find you're pregnant. That's, you don't have to go through some agonizing thing. Well, which one are we going to get rid of here? Choose one and abandon the other. You don't have to do that. You can make it all work. And this immediately got picked up by people who were, writing books about non-exclusive relationships and things. And we started getting invited to workshops and conferences and presentations. And people started saying that very same year, at Starwood, it was like our first polyamory workshops that people asked us to give, because of this. And so the definitions and the glossaries and the questions and answers and interviews all proceeded from this. And in all this time, we've had wonderful people who become a part of our life that have just created a whole family, community, support system, network that's been just phenomenal, just absolutely phenomenal. And I can't really see any downside to all this. People always ask, well, what are the downsides? What are the negatives? But personally, I really can't see any. Because, again, if you don't like it, you can't have any, and that's okay. If it doesn't work for you, that's all right. And part of the rules say, work it out, negotiate. Sit down with each other and talk about what's going on with you, and work up whatever agreements are going to work for everybody. And if they're not working, then renegotiate and change them. So that's the perspective that Morning Glory and I were coming from in creating this, is the perspective of a primary couple expanding our relationships to include other people. And Julie's perspective is very different. And a very important equal one, which I'd like to have her present.
I think first I'd like to, my name is Julie, and I also have been poly, I'd say from the moment I was born, certainly from the moment I started dating. I have in fact attempted monogamy on a couple of occasions with a couple of different marriages. What it does is induce depression, and
no, you're good.
It doesn't work for me.
Okay, no worries.
I have been asked on a number of occasions what the difference is between polyamory and swinging. And so I'd like to address that for a moment. I'd say that the first difference is polyamory is assuming two things. One is that everything is consensual, that all of the adults involved know what's going on, and that it is a consensual relationship choice, a consensual lifestyle commitment and choice. So that everyone is participating from a point of love and joy. There's no cheating involved. The other thing is, unlike swinging, which is more about a multiple of sexual partners, may or may not be more than one time, polyamory is about multiple long-term relationship, whether or not it concerns sex. You know, the sex is not primordial to the concept of polyamory. And it is, those are the things that set polyamory and swinging apart. My experience with polyamory, especially at this point in my life, is very different from what Oberon and Morning Glory have explored, in that I am an independent single priestess, and I reach out and am drawn to multiple relationships in my life, most of whom have primary relationships established, so that I am the priestess as paramour. And my primary practice as a priestess of Aphrodite and Priapus is to explore the spirituality of sexuality through the practice of sex magic, and by bringing happiness and erotic magic into the lives of multiple men and women in my life. Some of whom are married, some of whom have other types of primary partnerships, but again, all of whom are honest with their other partners about what is going on, and who also have multiple other partners. One of the very important aspects of being the priestess as paramour is in respecting the primary relationship of your partners as sacred, and learning to in honoring that relationship as sacred, in learning to court both people within that relationship. I actually, there are times when Morning Glory and I set up dates so that she and I can maintain our very close sisterly relationship, which supports both of our relationships with Oberon. And I have found it very beneficial in establishing a relationship with a new lover, to take flowers to the other woman, to court her with chocolate, and to also to be very willing to step back. That is one of the I think one of the more important lessons I have learned in these last several years is that there are times, because all relationships have difficulties, all relationships have challenges, and when the people in the primary relationship are having a point where they need time, for whatever reason, as the paramour, I need to be able to quickly, effortlessly, and with grace, simply step aside and give that relationship the space that it requires. Also, I found it's As the paramour, learning discretion is very important. Whether it's discretion in front of the children, because some people within the polyamory lifestyle share more or less with children in the household, depending on the age of the children and depending on other factors going on, depending on where they're living, whether in the deep south or whether they happen to be in Sonoma County, California, like we are. You know, there's the regional differences in what's accepted within the community that they're living in. And so being very, very conscious of that and willing to alter your behavior and to alter what I do, to just be sensitive to what's necessary in order for everything to be very smooth. The concept of love in that the other person's happiness is imperative to my ability to be happy. That person's happiness is often a direct result of my ability to be properly within discreet, gracious, and each primary couple I have found is very different. Each primary couple has very different boundaries. They've set up very different agreements within their relationship. And it's not up to me to pass judgment on those agreements. It's not up to me to tell them, that they're running their marriage right or wrong. It's just up to me to simply accept the rules as they are presented to me and decide whether or not I want to play. And then if I've agreed to play by those rules, then to do it with grace and integrity. I'd say that grace and integrity are the cornerstones of polyamory. You cannot successfully live within a polyamorous paradigm without grace and integrity. It cannot be done. I've had people ask me if it's possible to cheat on a polyamorous relationship, and yes, it is. If grace or integrity are compromised, then the cheating can and often does occur. At that point, you have a conflict. At that point, you have difficulty that must be addressed, and with the types of conflict resolution techniques that come into play within any kind of relationship.
You have to decide whether that relationship is really worth continuing. If that's even in the context of the polyamorous freedoms that are provided in empowerment, somebody still insists on lying and cheating and stuff like that. You have to consider that perhaps they are not somebody you want to spend the rest of your life with or have a relationship with, because you don't have to. There's a lot of elements of choice here, and one of the reasons why I think a lot of people find polyamory threatening is they feel that if their partner had choices, they would choose somebody different, and they would choose a different way of being. And in fact, that of course does happen. But it's a test for one's own integrity. If one can rise to the occasion to be as good a person as one would like to be, and would feel one should be, and one wants to present oneself as being, and one expects one's partner to be, then this is sort of a call to, then rise to the occasion and do it, because this provides the support system. Support systems is an important element of polyamory, because, think of how difficult it is to try to be a single mother, trying to make it in the world alone and have all the responsibility fall on your shoulders alone. Trying to maintain a relationship over a lifetime where you're the sole person responsible for your partner's fulfillment, happiness, shared experiences. You only get to see movies that both of you want to see. You only get to take vacations where both of you want to go. You only get to go to restaurants that both of you like that cuisine. You know, all of your experiences have to take into account things are shared. Well, there may be things that you like and you really would like to be able to do that the other person just isn't into. You know, one partner may really be into, you know, NASCAR racing, and the other partner may not. One partner may love to go to football games, and the other person, you know, would rather go to, you know, science fiction cons or something. You know, I mean,
we giggle a lot because, you know, Oberon and Morning Glory share several passions.
quite a few, actually.
Quite a few passions that I truly do not share. You know, I am not really big into dinosaurs. I can tell you the names of two, perhaps. I am a very limited science fiction reader. I've read about 2 or 3 science fiction novels my entire life. I don't do horror movies. And they share that love, and they have a great deal of fun together. Morning Glory at this time in her life is not up to traveling. And, you know, dealing with the stress of traveling and the physicalness of traveling and so forth is just not possible for her at this time in her life. So I am the lover that can come along and support him in his efforts on traveling the festival circuit. I can do a really good booth babe and help him with these kinds of workshops and support his, you know, his mission in being the companion. We've decided to use the Doctor Who model, and so I am the companion to his Doctor Who, and I have other lovers that I share other, you know, passions with. I have one who is my photography mentor. I have one who is a theologian, and I am the NASCAR babe. So I have a friend who likes to take me to NASCAR races.
And you, Morning Glory, like to do horse.
And Morning Glory and I go off and watch horse races and go to horse shows. And he doesn't give a damn about watching horses run in an oval. Doesn't appeal to him at all. Yeah. And there are many, many times that Morning Glory and I look at each other and just, you know, put our arms around each other and say, "Thank you, Lord, Goddess, that it's not just me and it's not just her, and we get to share in between us, and we get to neither one of us has to do it all." And frankly, we'd love a couple more women to share him with, because there's so much work involved in supporting the wizard that we could really use a couple more women to spread it out among.
Calling in reinforcements.
And it's all about calling in reinforcements.
Well, it's just like all the different men that it takes to keep you going.
It keeps me, yeah,
Pull all your
exactly.
facets of your diverse personality.
Absolutely, you know, and I'm one of these people. I end up moving quite often, and every time I've moved, I've sent out a call, and I've had 7, 8, 9 buff, wonderful men show up to pack the boxes and load everything into the trucks and move me. And
Father, support system for your son.
Yes, it's been fabulous. My son has an entire team of goddess parents who have, really helped raise him. Because it really does take a village, and that has been instrumental in being able to raise my son, because for a great deal of his life I was a single mom.
This is something that they have actually observed in animal behavior studies. Chimpanzees, for example, and bonobos have both been studied for their relationships, because they're complicated enough to be comparable to human relationships. And what they found was somewhat of a surprise, that people had just assumed that it was only the males who were interested in screwing around and getting lots of partners. But in fact, they discovered from studying animal behavior, and this since has been extrapolated to lots of other different animals and birds, that people assumed were monogamous because they partner. And then they found out that the DNA studies of the offspring found multiple fathers. And this is the advantage, is that the females would try to have sex with as many different potential mates as they could, so that their kids would have a lot of potential fathers, all of whom thought the kid might be theirs, and therefore would feel responsible for taking care of that mother and providing food and helping to raise the kids and being there to provide a support network and not kill them and eat them.
However,
It's a
this
great
also,
system.
it also brings up another element to this. A number of people that I've spoken to who initially object to the concept of polyamory object to it from the concept of, isn't it dangerous in terms of our current reality, post-plague, and what it's like. The STDs out there are much more dangerous than when I was a young person. It used to be you worried about a shot of penicillin. Now you worry about whether or not you're going to live. And that we address that with what we call a condom contract. And this requires an extraordinary level of integrity on everyone's part. And that is that you establish an agreement with who you are using barriers with, and who you are free to not use a barrier, not have to use a barrier with. And
these the core people that are connected and non-barrier required, and then people outside that are maybe peripheral lovers that may have a different set of restrictions. But this has really worked really well.
But it must be adhered to.
Yeah.
And if it is broken, it's a very serious offense, and it can be a deal breaker. So that's one of the things that we deal with. The other is, again, with parenting with children. While the bonobos might want everyone to think that all of the males are the father, most females of the human species, myself included, want to be absolutely certain we know who the father is. So that is when using barriers is also very important, in knowing exactly who you have permission to not use a condom with, so that you know exactly who the parents are. At the time when I had decided that I wanted to become a parent, that is one of the times in my life when I voluntarily chose to be monogamous. While I was trying to get pregnant, I wanted no doubt at all as to who the father was. And I felt for myself that the easiest way was during that time period to simply limit myself to only having sex with my husband. But there are other modalities for handling that, and none of them are wrong. It's really what serves the primary couple, what makes them the happiest, the most confident with what's going on. So those are the stickiest situations, if you don't mind the pun, that come up within a poly lifestyle. One of the other things that is extremely beneficial in the poly lifestyle that we talked in terms of having the network of support as we are aging. The network is becoming even more important. It was fun in my 30s and 40s to have the network. Now, it takes more than just the two of us to support Morning Glory and giving her care needs at certain times. When Oberon was deathly ill, and we were really very, very afraid that we were going to lose him, Morning Glory and I were very glad that there were other people that were helping us support him and taking care of his needs. You know, when it just comes down to help with the housework and the cooking and running a business and making the deadlines, and two is a very lonely number, and 3 is better. And when you can go beyond that exponentially, all of a sudden life gets a lot easier. And when you have an entire, network that you go to, and you know that these people are right there for you, it's empowering. It makes things so much easier. So much easier.
Yeah, they're down that way.
One of the things that I think the poly community is going to be dealing with more and more is the legalities of this. We have found in California that the easiest way to deal with this is to set up a poly family as a limited liability corporation. And that way you're all members in an LLC, and through that corporation you can establish powers of attorney and sign the various do not resuscitate and all the other kind of medical things that you need, the wills and provide for property distribution and all of that within the corporation. Now, every state in this union is completely different and has completely different laws, and so we are in no position to give any kind of legal advice. But we do know that if poly families go to look for a business model within their state, within their communities, that they can become a business instead of trying to work it out as the Mormons do. This is not a plural marriage, and that way we stay out of that whole mess with the IRS. We don't have to go there.
Yeah, there are all kinds of corporate models, and most of them require a core board of directors of at least 3 people. Well, that's when you add one more than 2. Marriages officially go to 2. Add one more, and you can become some sort of a corporate structure, whatever is most suitable for what you're trying to do. Business models are very common. People setting up a small family business with partners and can bring people in and shareholders and stuff. The LLC is a great model, and it's spreading. More and more states are allowing LLCs. But some people can do it as a church model, if they have a church that can license them to become a local congregation, they may have that kind of protection. There's lots and lots of different models, and people have to sort these out and find what's available locally. But it isn't as hard as people used to think. Oh, well, you can't have multiple marriages. Well, you just call it something else, but you can still structure it however you want to do.
But it's important to structure it, and it's important to do the paperwork. Because while we were young, we weren't thinking in terms of what if he's in the hospital and I want to come see him too.
Well, when you're young, you're invincible and immortal.
Right.
I mean,
right.
We survived, so we must have been.
Exactly. But when Oberon was in the hospital, because of the way we were listed and because of the way it was set up, I could go and visit, Winter could go and visit, Wolf could go and visit, all of us could go and participate in being there, in doing healing circles around him, because we were all family. And we didn't have to explain it any further to the staff at the hospital because we had the paperwork in place. So that I would highly encourage people to get this paperwork. It's usually available from your local community health departments or doctor's offices and so forth, and get the paperwork done that is required in your state in order to ensure visitation and ensure that your wishes are adhered to and that the decisions are made by the people you want making the decisions.
You know, another thing that's helped a lot has been the domestic partnership laws, so that it's easy to list for such purposes the people who are allowed to visit and count as families. You just list as partners, and nobody's going to really argue with that. You know, who you call partners. So, and this is a term that carries over from the corporate model into the family model because of the inroads made by the gay community trying to establish models to allow them to have other partners. And obviously, as we are shifting more and more to an acceptance of gay marriages, it's the same arguments, legal arguments that are being used to justify this. That basically, why the hell shouldn't anybody be able to marry whoever they want to? You know, who else's business is it? You know, which is pretty basic. Will ultimately apply to multiple partners as well. Nobody can really say, well, you know, it suddenly becomes somebody else's business if you want to add one more. It's just, there's no really place that makes sense to do that. And ultimately, all of this will have to shift because, you know, the arguments against it are specious. So that's basically, I think, what we want to say. Was
I think that. No, I think that's sort of polyamory in a nutshell.
Do you have any questions that you'd like to?
Is there always a primary partnership for a polyamory relationship?
Well, there tends to be. It's not a requirement exactly. It's just that people tend to form relationships, and then if they happen to be poly inclined, they can keep adding on. So you always have a certain seniority of which was the first relationship to be formed. And even if that doesn't become a primary in the sense of living together like a marriage, it's still, there's a certain sense that those people you've been involved with the longest or the most intimately tend to get a certain precedence in the thing. And this commonly gravitates into some sort of a primary. But the definitions of primary, secondary, tertiary that were very important in the very earliest days of formalizing a movement have ceased to become important over the years as people just work with it. They just relate, you know, and work out whatever it is. Naming it in detail hasn't been so important in more recent times as it was in the beginning.
Yeah. But no, I don't have a primary relationship. I am independent.
You and I have a pretty core relationship.
We have a pretty core relationship. You know, we've been lovers for 18 years. But the difference within a primary relationship, within a polyamorous paradigm, most primaries have an agreement with regards to asking for permission.
The veto.
And this can get rather complex. For the most part, it goes like this. I've met someone and I want to get involved. I bring that person to my primary and we have a discussion. We meet each other. My primary would then have right to say, yes, let's bring this, you have my permission, go have a wonderful time. Or, you know what? I don't like the energy, this doesn't work for me. No. Veto power is very, very important. And it can even be a veto without reason, just, you know, whatever. There are other agreements, such as whatever happens at a festival stays at a festival, and you don't have to have permission for individual people at the festival. You have permission for, you know, you want to go to Starwood and have a ball, have a great time, enjoy yourself. I'm going to enjoy myself. We're going to party, and then we're going to come home, and it's all okay. And it can, you know, the permission works out, can be along that continuum depending on how it works for the primary couple. I don't have anyone I have to go to permission for. Two, I am independent. I can choose my lovers myself. I don't have anyone to go to who has veto power over my choices. However, given who I am, and given that my relationships with the gentlemen in my life are, for the most part, very long term, and because of certain characteristics in my personality, I at times have very problematic lapses in judgment. And so what I have found works best for me, I do not go to Oberon or Tom for permission. I go to them for advice. And so I will meet someone and I'll think, and I'll go to them and say, do you know him? What do you think? And most of the time they say, oh yeah, actually Julie, I've known him for 30 years, you're in good hands. Occasionally it's, honey, run, don't walk in the opposite direction. That one's not for you. And I have found that is very helpful for me.
Well, you can trust this advice because
Yes.
we don't have an agenda of trying to keep you from having other relationships.
Right.
The agenda is looking out for your
My best
your
interest.
interests and well-being and safety, and that's and because of the nature of the polyamory structure, you can trust that. So,
Right.
and that's a very important thing, especially for someone like you.
Someone like
who
me.
has definitely gotten involved with some very dubious characters.
Dubious. Sometimes they're exciting, but it's not a good thing sometimes.
It really helps. I always consult, for that.
Yeah.
Just because, sometimes you just need an outside perspective to get a real handle on it. Because when you're involved in a thing, the pheromone intoxication is such that you are stoned. You are in no position of making rational decisions. But somebody who is not afflicted by that can step back and look at it and say, this person actually isn't a pagan. That's going to be a problem. This person is got a serious drug habit. This is probably not a good idea. Things like that you don't even think about when you're in it.
Or you may have no knowledge of or no access to that. For myself, I have found that it really works best to stay within a friendship network, so that actually all of my gentlemen friends know each other and have actually been friends for far longer than I have been in their lives. I have four of my lovers have been friends with each other for over 30 years, and it's a very safe place for me, and I appreciate that. And it also works for me because I have found it really helps if the men in my life have respect for each other. And it just makes it easier. It just makes everything smoother. It's not an imperative, it's not part of the rules, but for me, I have found that works better. It's not part of the rules, but it's definitely a guideline that we don't advise taking lovers outside of the pagan paradigm. We don't advise taking lovers outside of the poly paradigm.
So you never mate outside your species.
Yeah,
At some fundamental level, there's a great amount of wisdom in that, admonition.
And we are a different species. There are a lot of people out there who really just simply don't get us, cannot conceive of how this works. And the idea that love is that condition by which another person's happiness is imperative to your own is incomprehensible to many people. And if you and your prospective lover cannot share that definition, in my opinion, attempting to be poly is simply not going to work.
Sort of, if you don't dig it, don't do it. Don't try this at home, kids. We're professionals.
Any other questions?
You said in the case of when the primary has an issue, you step back. Has there ever been a case where you and one of the primary have an issue and one of the primaries have to step back and let you guys deal with it?
Well, more often what actually has happened with us has been that we tend to become mediators and counselors and help resolve these issues, because at the core of all of the relationships in my personal life certainly has been this assumption that we really want to work this out. We really do love each other and care for each other. We don't want to end the relationship. So if we're having a hard time, we usually call upon somebody not to bitch about the person so much as to seek guidance and help and counsel. Say, well, can you help with this? And so it's really interesting. Two people can easily get into kind of a loggerheads, but when you add a third relationship, it can often move, because whatever may be going on between any two, the third person, if there's love and trust between everybody, can become a mediator to kind of help work it through. And we actually find ourselves doing a great deal of that in our relationships.
And also, stepping back does not necessarily mean conflict. For instance, when I am with Oberon, I do not live with Oberon and Morning Glory. I have an independent home exactly 23 miles away. And,
Hilarious.
yes. And so when I visit Oberon, we generally stay in his room, and I sleep with Oberon.
Oh, we've got a guest room.
Yes. When I am preparing for one of these travels, I usually arrive a couple days early, because it is a great deal of work to get ready to go on the festival circuit. We have all of our merchandise to deal with and our handouts and all the stuff that goes with putting things together to travel.
To say nothing of setting everything in place to be okay while we're gone, so that things don't just fall apart in our absence. It's really usually takes a couple of days to prepare and a couple of days afterwards to get caught up, so it's big.
However, Morning Glory is Oberon's wife. As his wife,
38 years.
Yeah, 38 years. Goddess bless her. I don't know how she's done it.
Wait a minute.
Anyway.
You and I have been together for half.
I know. It's impossible. Before we leave, before we got on an airplane, Morning Glory prefers to sleep with her husband. And I knew that. I knew it intuitively. And so the very first time that we went on a trip and we were packing and so forth, I pulled Morning Glory aside and I said, would you like me to sleep alone tonight? Do you need to be with Oberon? And she said, Julie, you're right. I didn't know how to tell you. And thank you. And so that is our practice. And it's that kind of grace and stepping back. It's not always in conflict.
Yeah.
It's also in understanding what a wife needs as opposed to the paramour.
Yeah.
I am the alongside lover.
That was really sweet.
Well, it is actually. It really is. It really is sweet. There's a lot of sweetness and tenderness in this kind of thing, because the love that we all share among each other in all of these different ways is really deep and powerful.
Yeah.
And shapes our being, and everything about us is shaped around love.
Yes. Yes. I once had I have an ex-husband, much like an ex-parent.
that is not enough.
Not quite enough of an ex. But we were having extreme conflict, and I was very, very unhappy. And I did everything that I was told that the right thing to do. I packed a beautiful picnic. I arranged for the two of us to go off on this walk in the woods to this beautiful place by a stream in the redwoods. I had a beautiful picnic. Neither of us had our cell phones. There was nothing to interrupt us. There was no one for miles. And we sat down and we were eating, and I said, you know, I really need to talk to you. I'm having some real difficulty. And he said, okay. I said, you know, I'm not happy. You know, this isn't working for me. But we've put a lot of years into trying to make this work. I don't want to walk away. I've done that before. I don't want to just walk away from you. I want to negotiate. I want to make this work. And I truly believe that we can make this work. That your happiness, your being happy, is essential to my being happy. But I'm not happy. And I want to find a way to do something, change this, to do something that will allow us to both be happy and thrive and continue going forward. And he looked at me and he said, I'm not responsible for your happiness. Nothing's negotiable. You'll do as I say.
I don't care.
And I don't care if you're happy or not. It's not important. And I looked at him. I said, we are done. It's over.
Where do you go from there?
You broke it. And I realized that the mistake I made in that marriage was at the very beginning. We did not define what we meant by I love you. And so if I could close with anything, I would say that before you enter into any kind of a relationship, poly or monogamous, straight or gay, make sure you're both operating with the same definition of love. And if that person's definition of love doesn't match yours and doesn't meet your needs, walk away.
You'll have to eventually, and the sooner you do, the less pain you'll have to experience in the process. Anything else?
What was that? Do you have any questions?
Then our work here is
It's done. Less to be.